Power BI, Power Automate, and Microsoft Forms. Let's see how we can use them together to build a beautiful survey solution. Now, if you're new to this channel and you're looking for anything Power BI related, then make sure to hit that subscribe button. Now let's get started. So we are going to build a survey using Microsoft Forms. And then we're going to have a look at different ways of how we can store our responses and be notified automatically when there is a new response, and also to make sure that the report that we built using Power BI automatically refreshes. Now, as a first step, we of course need to build the form. So let's go to forms.office.com and add a new one. So over here, let's call this one company survey. And add a new question, and it's going to be a text answer. And as a first question, I'm going to ask what company do you work for? Now, as a second question, let's ask about the work environment, how people rate it. So how would you rate the work environment? And then let's have a third one where we're going to have a choice. Do you have a nice boss? And then yes or no. All right, so that's it. Now let's see if that works. So I'm gonna go over here to preview and type it in. So the company that I work for, datatraining.io. How would you rate the work environment? 5 out of 5. Do you have a nice boss? Yes. And I'm gonna submit it. All right, so now if I go back, then here under responses, you see we have now one response, and it gives me already some insights. Now, if I want to analyze this further, I can go and click on open in Excel, and let's open it. And here you see we have a response ID, start time, then I started filling out the survey, completion time, and then over here my email, name, and then the 3 questions that were in the survey. Now I could take this Excel file, import it into Power BI and start analyzing it. However, the downside of this is that every time I want to analyze the new survey results, I have to go here, download the Excel file, and replace the old Excel file. And this is not ideal. What we can do instead is go to Power Automate and build a flow that when there's a new response, this data set gets updated and I get notified by email. So step 2 is to go to flow.microsoft.com and create a new flow. So here I'm going to click on create. It's going to be an automated flow, which is then triggered by a certain event, which is when somebody fills out their survey. So let's open this one. And here at the top, you can already see when a new response is submitted. That's going to be my trigger. Now let's also give it a nice name. So over here is my survey flow. And I'm going to pick the first one. And let's click on create. So you see now that form submission is going to be my trigger. Now I just have to select over here which form. Okay, so I'm going to have over here the company survey. And then let's add a new step. Now here I have to choose the next action, which is I want to retrieve all of these responses. Okay, so here I'm going to look for form. And then you see the first one is get response details. Let's take that one. And also here I have to say which form. So that's the company survey. And then here, once you click in the box for a response ID, we have dynamic content that we can add. So you see how there's a response ID. Now let's hover over it. So the response ID gets the response details and fetches the content of the form response. Okay, so that's exactly what I want. So the second step, get response details, will fetch all of the details for each response that we get. Now, then we have to say, okay, where do we want to store it? And for this, we have a couple of different options. Maybe we want to store it in an Excel file on a OneDrive, maybe a Sharepoint List, or maybe in a push dataset inside of Power BI. Now let's go over these options one by one. So first, let's have a look at an Excel file on a OneDrive. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to Forms, and I'm first gonna take that Excel file that it generates. Now this already gives me a structure for the table to which I want to add new rows for each response. So let's take it as our basis and then save it to our OneDrive. And now we can go back to Power Automate and add a new step to our flow that is gonna add a new row to that Excel file. Okay, so let's add a new step. And here I'm gonna look for add a row, and the first one that pops up here, add a row into a table, Excel Online Business. That's the one that I need. Now, of course, you need to say where it is. So pick OneDrive for Business as your location. Then I have OneDrive, and then we need to select the file. And there you go. There's my company survey.xlsx. And then over here, the table inside of that file. I didn't rename it nicely, so it's still table 1. So now we need to map the answers to the questions or the different columns that we have in our table. So first of all, the ID. So for this, we can choose the response ID. Now here at the bottom, we have the main questions, like what company do you work for? Then we have how you would rate the environment. So over here, that's this one. And we have a nice boss. Yes or no. And then we have a few other boxes here. For example, the email address, we can map that to the responder's email. And then over here for the completion time, we can say the time of the submission. However, for the start time, there's nothing. Okay, so at the moment that's not possible to map. So we leave that one empty and can take it out later from the Excel file. And then also here for the name, so the name of the person who filled out the form, there's nothing that we can map there. Now, if you are interested in name, department, that kind of stuff, then we can add a step in between. And then here we can look for more user information. Let's see if we type in user profile. There you go, get user profile. And then here as the user principal name or the user, you can then use the responder's email address, okay? Now, if you then go back and then you go to this name field, you will see that in the dynamic content, you have now more options, like for example, the birthday, city, all that kind of stuff, and also the display name or the given name, whatever you need. Let's add then also another step where we get notified by email when somebody adds a new response. So here we can look for send email. Let's go here for version 2. So I want to send an email to myself. Okay, so over here, that's me. And then as a subject, I'm going to say new response. And then here in the body, we can already put the answers. So here we can use the dynamic content again. So first of all, we want to get the company name. And then we want to have the rating. And then we have an answer to whether it's a nice boss. So now we can try it out. So let's go back to our form and add a new answer. So what company do you work for? Company B. How would you rate it? And do you have a nice boss? Nope. I'm going to submit it. And let's go now to the Excel file on a OneDrive to see if a new row was added. And there you go. You see we have now our new response added to this file in the OneDrive. So the next step is to analyze our responses then inside of Power BI. So here I'm in a new workspace. I'm going to click on new and I'm going to add a new dataset that is then coming from OneDrive. So let's go to OneDrive for Business. And then here we can select the company survey XLSX. Let's connect to it. And here I want to go for import Excel data into Power BI so that I don't have to schedule any refreshes. And let's then also add a new report on that dataset. So over here, create a report. Let's build a simple table visual that shows the responses to our survey. Okay, so we have, first of all, what company do you work for? And then how would you rate the work environment? And do you have a nice boss? Yes or no? Now you see it returns one response, and actually we had 2 responses already. Now, few things that you need to check. Now, first of all, see if OneDrive is already synced. Okay, so that's fine. And then second of all, check if your dataset for the company survey, when it was last refreshed. Okay, so here for me that was a few minutes ago, but still before I added that second response. Okay. Now here for next refresh, you see it's not applicable for files that are on your OneDrive. Now, why is that? Well, if you would go here to schedule refresh and then OneDrive refresh, then you see that by default, OneDrive updates files hourly. Okay, so the reason that the second response is not in there yet is just it takes a little bit of time. So there can be a bit of a delay. So let's just check in a few minutes again, and then it will be updated. Now, what is important to know is that your dataset will be updated continuously on an hourly basis or so. And when you then open your report, it will show you also the latest responses, okay? However, if you leave your report open, as it is now, it will not automatically show those new responses unless you click on refresh, okay? Now, if it's really important for you that you can leave this report open and you see new responses coming in, then we have two options. Either we go for a different data source than an Excel file that's on OneDrive, which we're going to do next, or you go to your browser and you use some kind of add-in that keeps on refreshing this page. Okay, so here I have one that you can just add to, let's say, Chrome, and you can say, okay, I want to refresh this every 60 seconds or so, okay? So that you see the new responses coming in. So in the meantime, my company survey dataset was refreshed automatically without having to do anything, okay? Now, if I go back to my report and I click in refresh, you will see that the new response will come in. There you go. Now let's have a look at an alternative. Now, if it's really important for you that you have the latest responses popping up on your screen as they come in, then we could go for a streaming dataset. So in our flow, we have now when a response is submitted, well, that stays as it is. Then we get the response details, the user profile. Okay, that's optional depending on what information you need. But what we're going to change now is this tab over here. We're not going to add a new row to an Excel table. So we're going to get rid of this one and replace it with a new action. And this is going to be a Power BI action where we are going to add a row, but not to a Power BI dataset. So you see, add rows to a dataset. Just be aware it's preview. Okay, so I don't know if you really want to have this already in a live environment, but let's go and try it out. So here we can connect to our workspace. And then we can select the dataset. However, we don't have the dataset yet. So let's go to Power BI service and add a new one. So this is going to be a streaming dataset. And we're going to go for the API and click on next. Now let's call this one survey streaming data. And here we can get the values from our stream. So what do we need? Well, we need three things. We need the company as text, we need the rating as a number, and then we also want to know if we have a nice boss, and that's going to be a text. Now here you see how it's stored as a JSON file, and then you have the choice if you want to keep historic data. Now if you don't turn on historic data analysis, you cannot create a report. You can only create a dashboard, and it just stores the latest answers in a temporary cache and also gets rid of them. Now, by turning on historic data analysis, you can store up to, I believe, 200,000 rows. And that's kind of relevant over here because we do want to have historical responses, okay? So make sure that you have this one on and then click on create. Now back in Power Automate, we can now choose our dataset and you see now it is here, survey streaming data. Can take a few seconds before it pops up, okay? And then here we have a table. Here you need to choose real-time data. And then we see the three fields. And here we can do the mapping again. So we have the company. Now let's go to our dynamic content and search for company. Now what company do you work for? Then we can put in a rating. So how would you rate the work environment and whether you have a nice boss. And that's it. Okay, so let's save the workflow and try it out again. So I'm going to submit another response. So what company do you work for? Now, here we have company C. It's a perfect work environment. And yes, nice boss. Let's submit it. And let's now go to Power BI service, to our workspace. Now here we have our survey streaming dataset. So also here, it's not necessary to put any refreshes. So let's create a report. Now let's create a table again where we're gonna show the company, the rating, and well, we have a nice boss. And you see that we have now company C, rating 5, nice boss, yes. The previous two answers, they're not showing up. Okay, so I believe it's also not possible to get them back in. So if you have old survey data, then it's probably better to choose a different solution than this one. Now, this is a streaming dataset, and you might expect that you don't have to click on refresh here. Now let's see if that is true. So I'm gonna go and submit another response, company D, 4 out of 5, and no, I don't have a nice boss. I'm gonna go back, and you see, nothing happened. And if I click on refresh, only now it updates. And this is confusing to a lot of people because you think, I have a streaming dataset, it naturally flows in without you having to do anything. However, this is only the case for a dashboard. For a report, you still need to refresh that report page. Now let's take our survey and pin it to a dashboard. So over here, click on pin visual, and I want to pin it to a new dashboard. I'm gonna call it survey dashboard. Let's pin it and let's open it up. Now we have our two responses. Let's add another one. Now, what company do you work for? Well, company E, good work environment. Yes, I have a nice boss. And now I go back to my dashboard. And you see, it just pops up after a few seconds without you having to click on refresh. Okay, so let's do one more. That is very common as a SharePoint list. So I'm gonna go back and over here, delete that step where I add a new row to the Power BI dataset. Okay, so let's delete it and let's go and add a new one, add an action. And this is gonna be for SharePoint. So let's type in SharePoint and I want to add a new item. Okay, so let's go there and see what it gives us. And here you see we have create item. And here we first need to say what is your SharePoint address. So let's type it in. Then we're gonna choose the list name, but for this to be there, we first have to create one. So let's go to SharePoint and then add some new content, which is gonna be a list. And this is gonna be my survey responses list. Now here we can add our columns. So let's go there. And for the first one, we're gonna have some text. And this is gonna be their company. Everything we can leave as it is. And over here, I'm gonna add another one for the rating. And then another one where we're gonna have whether it's a nice boss. And then over here for the title, let's rename it to response ID. So now that we have our list, we can go back to Power Automate and then choose it from the list, survey responses. So after you pick the list, then you see we have the title, company, rating, nice boss. So for the title, we can map it to the response ID. So let's look for that. And then we have the company. Then we have the rating. And we have whether it's a nice boss. So let's save it and try it out again. Okay, so I'm gonna submit another response. This is gonna be company F. Okay, bad work environment, not a nice boss. And now let's go to SharePoint. Let's see if it's there. Let's refresh the page and you see there it is. Okay, so now I can connect to the SharePoint list inside of Power BI and start analyzing. So let's go to get data. This is going to be a SharePoint list. Then put in the site URL. And then look for our survey responses. So survey responses over there. Okay, so now we can create a table again. So here we're gonna have a table. Now you see when you have a SharePoint list, you have all of these columns that you actually don't need, and you can just remove them using Power Query, okay? But for now, I just leave them in, and I'm gonna choose company. Then I'm gonna choose rating and whether we have a nice boss. Okay, so once you have this, publish it to the workspace, and let's see if it automatically gets refreshed. And let's open it up in Power BI Service. And there it is. So let's see if it automatically refreshes. Let's add another answer. So company G. Okay, 2 out of 5. Nice boss though. And there you go. I'm gonna go and jump back to Power BI, and you see it's not there. Now I refresh the page, and see even after I did the refresh, it's still not there. And then you might think, yeah, but with OneDrive you just had to wait a few minutes and then it pops up. But here you can keep on waiting because it will not pop up. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to schedule a refresh. This is option 1, or you go back again to Power Automate and add another action that in the end it refreshes this data set. Okay, so let's go to our data set, survey responses, SharePoints, and then over here I can schedule a refresh. Now I probably have to go first and put in my data source credentials, just double check that. And then you can go back to schedule refresh, turn it on, and then over here how many refreshes you want. If it doesn't work, if you need to be notified, and then just click on apply. So if I go over here to my service responses SharePoint, I would refresh it now manually and then go to the report. Let's refresh this one as well. You see it updates, okay? But I have to manually trigger it or schedule a refresh. Now you see for each one of these 3 approaches, the refresh is a little bit different. Okay, so with the SharePoint solution, you need to schedule a refresh, otherwise the data doesn't update automatically. And that is a big difference to OneDrive. Okay, so if we go for that solution, you don't have to schedule any refresh. It just automatically updates, okay? Then with the streaming dataset, you also don't have to do anything. But the big difference there is that if you really need this up-to-date dashboard that always shows you the latest responses coming in on one screen, then that's probably the way to go. Or you go for the OneDrive solution and then keep on refreshing the browser page. Isn't it beautiful how all of these 3 different services nicely work together? I think it is. Now, if you have any other interesting ideas of how we can set this up using Power Automate, Microsoft Forms and Power BI to visualize, then share it with us in the comment section below. And if you want to stay up to date on everything Power BI related, then make sure that you subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video.